What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review episode 7 of season 2 of House of the Dragon, an episode called The Red Sowing, directed by Lonnie Parister, if I'm saying that at all correctly, and written by David Hancock. No relation to me, but I was a little worried throughout the majority of this episode that we were going to have another snooze fest or slow burn, depending upon how charitable you want to be in your description. But at a minimum, I think that final shot or that final scene where we see how Team Black has managed to beef up their numbers, that ought to get people excited for the season finale next week. And I was paying very close attention to the teaser for next week's episode, and there are a few little hints as to what it might contain. Like, there are two major contenders in the book that would make fantastic season finales. And it seems like all roads are leading toward one, but there was a very brief shot of another. Maybe there'll be more than one battle. Like, maybe we'll see multiple battles on multiple fronts. We could be in for an absolute barn burner next week that might even rival episode 4 of season 2, but I'm excited. But for everybody out there who's been critical about some of the ingredients of this show, I think those criticisms are valid. Like when we see yet another episode of Daemon sitting around having weird dreams, like obviously in this episode he didn't have any dreams about his mom, but essentially just wanking it in this freaking castle, wasting time having nightmares. It's like y'all have taken the coolest character of the show and effectively castrated him and made him arguably one of the most boring characters in the show. But fingers crossed, hopefully the Daemon Targaryen that we all know and love, who is fucking awesome in the book and really cool in season 1, hopefully he'll get a chance to assert himself next week. And when you watch interviews with showrunner and writer Ryan Condal, he always talks about how he and George R. R. Martin share this attitude that what makes Daemon so interesting is that he's equal parts hero and equal parts villain. But we haven't really seen him do much of either. We've seen him make kind of a mess of things and people are talking trash to him, but I have found that to be the most frustrating aspect of the season. But this episode did give us some good stuff that I did find interesting, because we got to see Rhaenyra beefing up her dragon riders. So let's start with the first scene with Adam of Hull, who I think in last week's review, I might have gotten Alan and Adam's names mixed up a few times. Very much like how I used to get sometimes Aemond and Daemon's mixed up, and sometimes you'll get your Aegons mixed up. There are a lot of similar sounding names due to just family names in this show, but Adam flies sea smoke, Alan is the sailor. They are both of Hull because they're bastard children, but we obviously know who their papa is. But I think Adam of Hull has huge potential as a fan favorite moving forward. If they capture just one or two of his big scenes from the book and put it into season 3, people are going to fucking love this guy. And I think he was very well cast. Good-looking dude, lean, athletic. I was watching the documentary about last week's episode, and they're talking about how he insisted upon doing all of his own stunts when he was shooting those scenes, being chased by the dragon. And he says basically when he's a kid, every kid dreams about, playing make-believe where you're fighting dragons or running from dragons. And he said basically just felt like a big kid running through the woods, and he was just having a blast. But we finally got to see him land sea smoke on the beach, have his confrontation with Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra's dragon Syrax is none too pleased to be kind of... It's funny how the dragons... They can coexist peacefully, but anytime they're uncertain of the mood of their riders, they get very aggressive and unpredictable. But I like how Adam very calmly and very coolly explains how the dragon came to him. He didn't pursue it. He didn't want it. It's a little bit like that dream sequence with Viserys later on when he talks about how he never wanted the crown, and the crown kind of, it was a heavy burden to bear. But I feel like the best rulers are those who usually those who don't seek power. And maybe the same holds true here, where sometimes even if you don't want a dragon, maybe a dragon will come to you. But obviously what Adam does not know is that Sea Smoke's previous rider is his half-brother, Laenor Velaryon. And we haven't seen much of Laenor since they faked his death in season 1 so he could run away with his lover to, sail on ships and go into battle and blah, blah, blah. I don't think we'll see Laenor again, because in the novel, Laenor just gets killed. Like, what they did to fake his death was actually a death for real. So there's no major story beats that would bring him back. But obviously the show has to invent a ton of material. So maybe they'll have some sort of confrontation between Laenor and Adam at some point, but I don't think so. But in any case, major win for Team Black, even if Jace is a little skeptical. And Jace is he's awash in a lot of conflicting emotions, because on one hand, obviously, he wants his mother to win. On the other hand, one of the things that has allowed the Targaryens to rule for as long as they have is the fact that they have dragons and nobody else does. But if suddenly anybody can be a dragon rider, well then who's to stop somebody from going after the throne with their dragon if and when Rhaenyra is no longer in the picture? Because Jace's dragon is a fearsome beast, but it's considerably smaller than friggin' Vermithor, which just got claimed by Hard Hugh or Hugh Hammer or Hugh the Hammer. He goes by a lot of different names. We'll just call him Hugh. But Hugh got the second largest dragon in the Seven Kingdoms. Vermithor used to be flown by Jaehaerys, who was king before Viserys, and very old dragon. And they say in the show, second largest dragon in the world behind Vhagar. But obviously, if you put Vermithor out there and one or two other dragons, they're going to eat Vhagar alive. So anyway, I'm kind of jumping around all over the place, which is always a good sign that I've enjoyed the episode. But I think Aemon showed some well-deserved hesitation and prudence at the very end of the episode when he's flying towards Dragonstone and sees that there's basically a small army of dragons waiting for him. It's like, Vhagar, obey me. We're getting the fuck out of here. But getting back to that scene with Jace and Rhaenyra, I thought it was interesting how he finally confronted her about his true parentage, his father, Harwin Strong, a.k.a. Breakbones. Everybody knows that Breakbones was his father, but he basically says, did it even occur to you, what hair color I might have if and when I was born, etc. and so forth. And he is a little worried that the only thing that's giving him legitimacy is kind of slowly but surely being spread out amongst the common folk, the lowborn as they're described. And without giving away any spoilers, I'll just say that to some degree, I won't say how much, Jace's concerns about possible rivals and threats might be legitimate, because this is a world where might makes right. And the only reason the Targaryens are in power in the first place is because Aegon the Conqueror and his two sisters, they had 3 dragons, and the rest of Westeros did not. And they said, all right, we'll take this country. It belongs to us now. And that's the way it's been ever since. But while all this is going on, we get to see a little drama over in King's Landing. There's a really interesting scene where we see in the background Aemon is sending some of the disgraced members of the Kingsguard off to the wall, and he's stripping them of their cloaks and that sort of thing. I thought he was going to geld them or castrate them. If you read George R. R. Martin long enough, you're inevitably going to come across a lot of people getting castrated. And in Fire and Blood, people get castrated all the time, usually if they're a rapist and that sort of thing. But sometimes they get gelded just for the hell of it if somebody's feeling particularly aggressive. But I thought it was interesting seeing Larys in the foreground being told the news about sea smoke being seen with a rider. And Larys just says, you know what? We're just going to let this kind of slowly but surely spread. We're going to let the wind take care of it and let that rumor spread. Obviously, at this point, Larys realizes Aemon is no friend to him, and he's slowly but surely trying to help out Aegon. And Aegon, let's just say his recovery is kind of... It's kind of horrifying, but it needs to be horrifying if he's going to get up to speed much more quickly. We see the Grand Maester is kind of guiding him through his physical therapy, and it's putting him in agonizing pain, and they're all feeling warring impulses because they need Aegon to be mobile as soon as humanly possible, but at the same time, they need him to recover and heal. And in the book, Aegon basically stays in the bed for a year, drinking milk of the poppy, sleeping 9 hours out of every 10. And they haven't really told us how much time has passed since he and Sunfire quite literally went down in flames. So it could be weeks, could be months. We really have no idea. But I do get the feeling that the show is kind of speeding things along. But one of the scenes that I found to be interesting is when Mysaria gives Rhaenyra basically a little knowledge that should be obvious to Rhaenyra, but perhaps Rhaenyra has been so sheltered in her life, she's not aware of this. But the Targaryen men like to go to pleasure houses. They like to have sex with whores. They like spreading their seed, and there are bastards aplenty, basically in any city in which Targaryens operate, whether you're talking about on Dragonstone or in King's Landing or wherever. And so while Rhaenyra's been going through all these dusty old tomes trying to find out who are our distant relations and that sort of thing, Mysaria says, look, you can go to any tavern in King's Landing and find, a handful of bastards who have as much Targaryen blood as some people with very legitimate claims to the throne, which leads to basically the world's biggest audition to see who is going to possibly ride Vermithor and who's going to possibly ride Silverwing. And slowly but surely, the rumors start to spread through the city. And Hugh's a little bitter about the death of his daughter, and he basically realizes, if I have a dragon underneath me, we will never want for anything ever again. So while his wife is justifiably concerned that she does not want to be a widow, Hugh does decide to sign up, as well as Ulf White, a.k.a. Ulf the White. He's been talking all sorts of trash in that tavern for years, it seems like, about his Targaryen blood, and I can't remember what his claim is. I know with Hugh, he says his mother, who worked in a pleasure house, was a kind of an unrecognized sister of the parent of one of the parents of Daemon and Viserys, but I'll have to double check that. In any event, Ulf the White, he also has some Targaryen blood, and he basically gets shamed and humiliated into participating and getting on one of those boats and heading off to Dragonstone. But arguably my least favorite scene of the episode were those scenes that take place at Harrenhal. I feel like Harrenhal's been the Achilles heel of this entire season. There hasn't been a good scene yet at Harrenhal, and I know it's kind of a bold statement, but it's true. It's been so goddamn boring. Like, everything dealing with Harrenhal should have taken one episode, and instead they've taken too little story and like butter scraped over too much bread, spread it out over the whole season. There's an epidemic of TV storytelling these days where writers take like the thinnest little scrap of plot and try to stretch it out over 8 episodes. Like we saw with Star Wars, The Acolyte. They had enough story for basically like a 120-minute episode and spread it out over 8 episodes. And I'm not saying this scene in Harrenhal is as bad as that, but it was kind of lame, like seeing this little kid who just got promoted to being the Lord of Riverrun, basically Lord Oscar Tully. He brings all the River Lords to see Daemon, and seeing this little kid who probably like just got out of diapers only a few years ago talking smack to Daemon Targaryen, I didn't buy it. And I know he's trying to assert himself and saying that you need to dispense justice on the person who committed hate crimes in your name, so on and so forth, and that'll bring the Blackwoods and the Brackens together. I just thought the scene, the way it was staged, I didn't find believable at all, because Daemon would be as likely to put up with somebody talking any trash to him as like a dragon would. Like he would just, he's got the blood of the dragon. He would hack you down then and there, no matter what the consequences might be. And so I intensely dislike that scene, but maybe next episode they will stick the landing and redeem us, or redeem the show and redeem Daemon with some kick-ass scenes where he actually gets to show what a bad motherfucker he can truly be. And I don't want to call too much attention to writer David Hancock, but he seems to have a knack for writing scenes, new scenes for this show that do not come from the book, that are not inspired by the book, that annoy the fucking hell out of me. He also wrote episode 3, which if people remember, ends with one of the lamest scenes humanly possible, when Rhaenyra in disguise goes to King's Landing trying to make one last overture for peace. It was another scene where I completely called bullshit. So I'll be paying close attention from now on. Any episode written by David Hancock, I'll kind of brace myself for the worst. But he's my least favorite writer on the staff for House of the Dragon, in spite of having an awesome last name. And as far as some of the other subplots are concerned, we see the Sea Snake having a little heart-to-heart with Alan about possibly considering trying to become a dragon rider, because no one really knows, like, what does it take to get a dragon to, like, bend its neck and accept you as a rider. And there are a bunch of different paths you can take. I mean, sometimes you can just hop on when you don't even realize, like, how stupid it is, and the dragon will accept you. Sometimes an egg will be placed in a baby's crib, and it hatches, and the dragon and the baby grow up together. Sometimes, as is the case with the character of Nettles, who's been basically written out of the show, she left out a sheep every single day for Sheepstealer until Sheepstealer realized, well, she's my meal ticket. She gives me food every day. I'll gladly go flying with her. But the Sea Snake suggests that Alan might consider trying to become a dragon rider, because if his brother can become a dragon rider, then maybe he can as well. But Alan tells him that he yearns only for the sea, and all I'll say is that both Alan and Adam, there's a lot of runway left in both of their stories, so expect big things from both of them. What else? I'm just checking my notes. Oh, Rhaena. Up in the Vale, we see Rhaena watching as her 2 younger half-brothers are departing. If you remember, the youngest children of Daemon and Rhaenyra have been sent there to basically go into hiding and be protected, and they are the half-siblings of Rhaena, because Rhaena obviously has the same father. But as those little boys are leaving, and I believe they're being sent over to somewhere, it's one of the free cities. Anyway, they're going to be sent across the Narrow Sea. But as they're leaving, she notices, or she sees an opportunity to kind of, haul ass and go in search of a dragon, which, small spoiler, it's the dragon that was suggested last episode when she saw the dead, burnt bodies of all the sheep that a dragon had been feasting on. And as I hypothesized in my last video, I believe the story of Nettles is being folded in with Rhaena just to give Rhaena something to do in the show, and that Nettles is being written out of the show, which does, anytime you throw a rock into a pool, it creates a ripple effect. I'll be curious to see how they handle that, but Sheepstealer originally was a wild dragon on Dragonstone living in a cave, and it just kept burning everybody that came to try to claim it. I suspect the next episode we'll see Rhaena having a little face-off with Sheepstealer. And there's one subplot which I find a little bit iffy, but the show, they're barely hanging on to it, making it feel legitimate. But they basically have introduced this idea that while Rhaenyra is maintaining this blockade of King's Landing and basically starving out the city, at the same time, she's also sneaking all this fish into the city in order to win over the loyalty of the people. And I have a hard time believing that the powers that be in King's Landing would not get wind of the fact that like the entire city's being fed in secret by the very same person who's blockading it. I mean, they would just send down guards to claim the fish, etc., and they would distribute the fish however the hell they choose. It's because the show's trying to depict Rhaenyra in a heroic light, whereas in the book, let's just say, she's a little more harsh and doesn't feel like giving away free fish and that sort of thing. But I guess they are managing to thread that needle very carefully where it's just plausible enough that she'd be able to maintain a blockade while at the same time, kind of taking with one hand and giving with the other. But I have a feeling next episode is going to wrap that up, so we won't have to worry about that subplot anymore. But speaking of weird subplots, what the fuck was going on this episode when Alicent was just like, I'm going swimming and nothing's going to happen. I'm just going to kind of cleanse myself of all the sins of the past. And I was like, you know what? If this was season 2 or season 3 of Game of Thrones, she'd probably be buck-ass nude and turn a very boring scene into a very erotic scene. And as an actress, she mentioned how they shot a sex scene for this season that almost got like animalistic in its intensity, and she did not seem shy in any way, shape, or form. So as an actress, she seems like a person who probably would not have had any problem with that whatsoever. But it was during that scene where she goes swimming in the lake, I was like, this episode fucking sucks! And I was really getting frustrated with just how boring it is, because if you go to bat for a show with a bunch of videos, like every once in a while you want the show to justify all the passionate defenses that you make, but you also have to be honest when a show is just dropping the ball. But luckily, the show managed to stick the landing, and we got this great scene at the end where all the people who want to potentially be dragon riders are brought to Dragonstone, and the workers revolt. They're like, look, dragons are the last examples of the magic of old Valyria. It's been sullied by bastards. We want no part of this. And Rhaenyra's like, all right, well, I'll supervise it myself. She goes out there and she calls to Vermithor, and Vermithor comes out. And Vermithor, he's big and scary. He's known as the Bronze Fury. And I love how she just goes upstairs to like sit on the balcony, almost like she's at the theater to watch the show. And yeah, Vermithor, maybe it's just because he managed to eat a few people before he finally calmed down. But we see him burning people, stomping on people, crushing people, going berserk. Ulf the White basically falls off the side and runs and hides in the caves. I'm like, you realize there's more dragons in there than Vermithor. But in any case, Ulf the White runs off and hides. And what makes Hugh finally kind of get his courage up, there's basically 2 people left, him and a lady, and she goes taking off. Vermithor's about to swallow her, and Hugh's like, take me, blah, blah, blah. And he faces off with the dragon. Dragon takes a long, hard look at him. Smells some of that Targaryen blood, if in fact that's the connection between dragons and riders, and finally bends his neck, and they bond, and a dragon rider is born. Now, I've talked a lot of shit about the character of Hugh throughout this season because they've made up so much material that doesn't come from the book. However, now that Hugh is writing Vermithor, they can actually use his scenes from the book. So there's a chance moving forward that Hugh might get really, really interesting. I won't say good, bad, mediocre, or whatever, but he's got some really interesting scenes in the not-so-distant future. And so I just hope now that they can actually just adapt the character successfully, because if they do, no one's going to forget the name of Hugh Hammer or Hard Hugh anytime soon, or at least over the next couple of years. And we also see that Ulf the White, in spite of being a total coward and running for cover, and he ends up stepping in a clutch of eggs, for whatever reason, Silverwing, that's coiled up in the corner, having a nice long nap. Maybe Silverwing's lonely. Maybe Silverwing detects the fact that Vermithor just got a new rider. But once again, both in the work of George R. R. Martin and in the show, it's always a little bit mysterious as to when, where, and how and why a dragon bonds with a rider. Silverwing decides Ulf the White is the one, and yet another dragon rider is born. Which leads to a really strange scene where Ulf the White basically decides to do a flyby of King's Landing. Very stupid, very risky, considering that Vhagar is there. And I feel like for a new dragon rider, he probably wouldn't be trusted with a mission of such importance. But he does it, and Aemon sees what's going on, runs off into the outskirts of King's Landing, or he rides off on a horse to get it. And there we see Vhagar's healing. I mean, Vhagar, if you remember, got his guts completely raked open by Melis back in episode 4. But dragons do heal, but he's been recovering. But a dragon can't fight every day if they're getting their guts raked open by another dragon. But Vhagar takes flight, slowly but surely flying. I mean, once again, Vhagar, big, scary, terrifying, not necessarily that maneuverable. But Aemon, with his one eye, is keeping a close eye on Dragonstone off in the distance. And he finally realizes, yeah, this is not a good idea. And we get that great badass shot of Rhaenyra, covered in ash and soot on the island, like basically doing a big chest thump, flexing her newfound muscle now that she's got a fucking army, a small army of dragon riders. She's going to be hell on wheels moving forward. And we see in the teaser for next week's episode that Aemon approaches Helaena about riding a dragon as well. And I can't remember in the show if she's already a dragon rider or if in the show he's trying to convince her to take a crack at being a dragon rider, because in the book Helena's mind has come so unglued from the murder of her son and just all the chaos around her, she kind of descends into madness. If you remember, she likes to make all those predictions, but she gets increasingly loopy as the war continues. But it looks like Aemon at a minimum is going to try to convince his sister to get in on the action for the season finale. So I have no idea what to expect from the season finale. If we can just get 1 or 2 scenes that are ripped straight from the book and adapted well, I'll be a happy fan. That's all I really require. And I know different people watch this show for different reasons. Most people have not read the book. They don't give a fuck about the book. But for me, I love the book. I've read it 3 times. And all I care about is the integrity of the novel being acknowledged and sustained and not contradicted. And so far, even though the show's kind of zigged and zagged a bit, like with this stupid fucking storyline of Daemon having bad dreams, but more or less they're capturing the major beats of the novel, and that's all I ask for. So fingers crossed. I'm praying to the old gods and the new, as they say in the setting. Give me some good scenes next week, and I think all the second guessing and criticisms of season 2 will get very quiet if the season 2 finale is fucking epic. And HBO has already greenlit season 3, and hopefully it won't be too long of a break between season 2 and season 3, because I feel like the break between 1 and 2 definitely has hurt the overall numbers of the show. Although I checked the Nielsen ratings for all the basically all the shows out there right now, and while it's not quite as popular as The Boys, it's still insanely popular. And also people have to keep in mind that when you look at the Nielsen ratings, for the streamers, it doesn't include all the viewers that are just watching it on traditional cable. So season 2 is doing very, very well. It's just not quite reaching the heights that I think it ought to. But the show's not quite as good as I would like it to be. There are some boring episodes, so I totally understand. But I think, we can all expect good things next week. But I think that's all I've got to say for now. I hope all the dragon lovers out there are very excited. And if you're a Dungeons & Dragons player, I hope you're calling up your friends saying it's time to roll some dice and slay some dragons or ride some dragons. Anyway, everybody's going to be getting dragon fever after that episode, because we've got Vermithor, Silverwing, Sea Smoke, Cyrax. I can't remember the name of Jace's dragon. And obviously, we still have Caraxes, Daemon's dragon, all on Team Black. And we've got Vhagar, and we got the crippled Sunfire, and possibly Helena's dragon. Not to mention Daeron Targaryen, Viserys' youngest son, who was mentioned last episode, who is currently on the march with Otto Hightower with his dragon. But it's going to get very interesting for Team Green moving forward. I feel like this whole season has been just a series of victories for Team Green, but maybe Team Black's about to score a big win. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If so, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. But I look forward to discussing the season 2 finale with all y'all next week. But I hope you all have a great week. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.